most of you who are believers or have at least done a little bit of research and thought into reincarnation, you know that certain birthmarks are sometimes believed to be connected to your past lives. It's a belief in many cultures around the world that a birthmark somewhere on the skin reflects a wound dealt to you in a previous life. And there have actually been some modern studies of reincarnation where they've found exactly that. In many of these cases where children remember past lives and they've done some digging and found out who they were in past lives, they can tie these birthmarks sometimes to people that they remember the past lives of. So the book by Ian Stevenson, going over that, is below. If you get through any of Ian Stevenson's books and you don't believe in reincarnation still, I don't know what to say, but yeah, I'm not here to talk about that. I'm here to talk about what the Norse sources say about these birthmarks. And there's two that you may have heard of, and there's one that you definitely haven't heard of and you have no idea about probably, but it's going to blow your mind. So first, the two come in the sagas. These are written shortly after the Viking Age, documenting tales of pagans. The first one comes in the semi-mythological Gautrek's saga, where one of the heroes, Steitgardir, refers to the marks on his arms coming from when his grandfather got his arms ripped off by Thor. Steitgardir's grandfather was said to be a giant and an enemy of Thor, actually, so in return for this, Thor tore off his arms and basically cursed him to be a criminal and never allowed to own any real estate in any of his future lives. So if any of you here are watching and you're maybe very tall or have committed some crimes and or just can't seem to find a property to buy, I would check your arms for some birthmarks and maybe your reincarnation of Steitgardir. Second example comes in Thorda Saga Radu. Here the hero was born with a mark on his left arm, exactly where his father received a wound. Thordir, the father, died while his wife was actually pregnant with their third son, and he actually comes back reincarnated as his own son. And his wife seems to have knowledge of this, actually, since it was her wishes that the newborn child be named after his father, Thordir, who he was reincarnated as. As is tradition in the North, it's usually the great-grandfather that the first son be named after, but of course that just has to do with the timing of the death. Most fathers don't die while their wife is pregnant with their son, but in this case it is. It's a story of a father being reincarnated as his own son. So these sagas are written in the 12 to 1300s, and they are stories written long after pagan times officially, where most of the historians will tell you that pagan beliefs and traditions had died out by this time. And that's all a load of shit, as you know if you have watched my channel. And here is yet another example of how most historians are worthless and they parrot the same lies that have been told to us for 1,000 years. What most people don't know is that this belief in reincarnation and these birthmarks continued all the way up until really modern times. In the Scandinavian folk tradition, birthmarks and other rashes or things on the skin like that were often referred to as elvel in Sweden, alvel in Norwegian, and it basically means elven fire or elven burn, something like that. So you guys all know what the elves are in the Norse mythology. They are the ancestral spirits. So alvel is simply the marks given to you by your ancestors. We have stories and records that people still believe this, all the way up into the 1800s, 1900s, I think. Even today, that's what they call these rashes or birthmarks. Depending on who you ask, they might tell you different things. In the folk tradition, there are a few people throughout the ages that may tell you, yes, absolutely, these are birthmarks, these elf burns reflect wounds that you received in a previous life. You know, still holding this pagan belief in reincarnation all the way up until 100 years ago sometimes. Others throughout the ages in the folk tradition were still very, very Christian, and if they heard such a thing, they would be like, that's the devil's work. Don't speak about such things. There is no reincarnation, only heaven and hell. But at the same time, those people that will curse on that kind of stuff, they'll still be the ones calling these birthmarks elf fire, or elf burns, of course. So these markings that they believed were given to you by the elves. Not much changed over 1,000 years. Like many things in the folk tales and traditions, the name and concept did not really change, but the only thing that really changed is the understanding of these pagan terms and myths and what they represent. So in my opinion, yeah, I think for sure in pagan times, going back 1,000 years or more, these birthmarks were also called, you know, elf fire or elf burns, or at least something to do with that name, and they reflect the wounds that you received in previous lives, as is a common belief in many places in the world. So take a look at your body for these marks, any birthmarks. Maybe do some digging into your ancestry and see if any family had received wounds that correspond. Don't ask me, I unfortunately have way too many of these. I think I probably come from a line of violent people, but yeah, let me know in the comments what you guys discover. That's why I make these videos, is so we can all share ideas and learn from each other. So that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed. Vi ses nästa gång.